Hello, welcome to the end plenary for the first day of our inaugural conference. I'm glad you're here. I am really honored to be here with some exceptional colleagues to have a conversation about equity and anti-racism in infant and early childhood mental health consultation from the consultant's perspective. These individuals are the ones who are out there doing the work with the caregivers and providers for young children and really have some wonderful insights to share with us. To start off, I want to locate myself. I identify as a white cisgendered female who comes from the city of New Orleans. And, based on my work with the Center of Excellence and a lot of work with Dawn Yazzie, I began to explore who was here on the land before me and find out more about the Native and Indigenous people here. And so each time I have the opportunity to present, I try to find out a little bit more. What I found out today was that New Orleans was located on a site that has been and is known as Babanca, which is a Choctaw word for a place of other languages. This territory has always been a multilingual and multicultural place. We in New Orleans often refer to our city as a gumbo because it's got so many cultures beyond, that have come here over time from many, many places. Since contact of the white colonizers, we've seen numerous people from all over the world arrive and settle here, sometimes of their own volition and sometimes by force. New Orleans now, as always, is a highly cosmopolitan territory with all kinds of overlapping sovereignties and fidelities. And when I think back to locating my place, I believe that growing up here really exposed me to a diversity of people, cultures, and lifestyles, and that has been a foundation in helping me to develop an appreciation for and curiosity about multiple cultures and always wanting to learn more and to really have developed a deep appreciation for the perspectives of others and their experiences. So I am very happy to be able to be inviting you to listen to some stories of the consultants out there in the field doing the work. I'm going to introduce them briefly and then set the framework for our conversation, and then they're going to introduce themselves in much more depth. But we are fortunate enough to have Deborah Chalmers with us, who is the director of the Infant Early Childhood Mental Health Program. And she also does consultation. So she's wearing two hats for us here. We have Claudia Lara from Smart Support and India Cultural Center. She's in Arizona. We also have Hien Sanchez, who is from Tulane and works with the Tykes program here in New Orleans. Dawn Yazzie is coming to us from Arizona as well. She's not only with Smart Support and doing a lot of the work out there in the field as a consultant, she also is a Center of Excellence faculty member for the consultation. And then there's myself, and I've already introduced myself. So we're going to be talking about equity today, right? And I want to kind of frame that conversation before we get started, kind of get us all kind of in the same space. So I'd like you to take a moment, pull out a pen and a piece of paper, and I'd like you to write down, what does equity mean for you, right? I've got some pictures here. We saw the picture that Eva shared at this morning's plenary of the children looking over the fence and having different supports and maybe not even necessarily being on the same ground, and the removal of the fence to work toward liberation. We have this bike analogy that's been used with every person getting the same size bike. It might be equality, but it's not equity. And equity is really about providing people what they need. So giving you a second to go ahead and kind of jot down, how would you define equity? This is another image that's been used where we look at the individual person, the community, and then those policies and laws. And as you're writing that definition down, getting a chance to look at it, really think about what equity means to you. I'm going to share some of the definitions that we have that have been put out there. And amazingly, they echo a lot of what Eva said at our plenary this morning. that when we think about equity, the Center for Social Inclusion defines racial equity as both an outcome and a process. So here's an outcome definition that NACI has put out there. And equity would be the state that would be achieved if individuals fared the same way in society, regardless of race, gender, class, language, disability, or any other social or cultural characteristic, right? So that those things would not necessarily be related to people's achievement level, that they would all achieve and have the ability to achieve regardless of where their neighborhood is, what their zip code is, what their socioeconomic status, right? So it highlights that equity is achieved when one's social characteristics no longer determines and predicts one's health, one's education, one's development, or one's socioeconomic outcomes. And then the other aspect of it is process, right? That we are referring to the process of working to address and confront those root causes of inequities, right? Not just their outcomes, not just their manifestation. So this is the process of identifying, confronting, and addressing those root causes, underlining the narratives of equity that pervade all of our institutions and systems, so that those most impacted by historical, institutional, and structural racial inequity are meaningfully involved in the creation and implementation of institutional and organizational policies and practices that impact their lives, right? So this involves us questioning and then disrupting policies, practices, attitudes, and cultural messages that reinforce differential outcomes by race or fail to eliminate them, those differences. And I've come to this understanding through a lot of my conversations and my readings of the work that Khadija Johnston and Eva Shrivers have put forward. And I have been fortunate enough to be able to listen to a lot of their presentations, to have discussions with them. So I want to make sure that I'm giving credit to them as I talk about this. And so, you know, we've got this framing of equity. We're thinking of it as outcome and process. We are in the process phases right now of disrupting equity. So we want to really think about that disruption and where our role as consultants are, right? So, you know, I'm channeling Khadija here. This is her slide, but her assertion is that we are in a really concentrated time of reckoning with historical and contemporary hurt and the potential of healing. That right now we are in the time of a transformation, and that we as mental health consultants have the ability, have the potential to heal the injustices that have been occurring for centuries in our country and are impacting the children that we are providing the consultation for. We have the ability to influence that process and that outcome, right? In addressing forms of oppression, right? So here we're going to share a lot of the antidote of, I'm going to share a little bit of anecdotal evidence from studies and some research. And then our panel is going to talk about providing mental health consultation with an equity lens, how they got here and how they support consultees in creating a positive equity process and outcome for young children, right? So how do they really help to support that? We know that inequities in disciplinary practices exist, that has been demonstrated, and that there's patterns of racial and gender disproportionality. So we know that children of color experience negative discipline and expulsion at higher rates than white children, and we know that boys also experience this at higher rates, right? It's well documented. This isn't something to debate. We know it's happening. And we also know from the work of Eva Shrivers from the Smart Support Program. We've got two folks here from that program, as well as from the work of Annie Davis. We are beginning to understand more about how mental health consultation can disrupt some of this disparities, right? This research that was done shows that early childhood mental health consultation is impacting distortions that are occurring. These distortions that I'm showing here, right? So African-American boys initially had lower scores than their peers on initiative, self-control, closeness, attachment, and higher scores on conflict, expulsion, risk, and negativity, right? But after a period of consultation, a 12-month consultation, 6 months of consultation, they showed the greatest growth. These African-American boys showed the greatest positive growth on all measures, and they outperformed their peers, and that these gains continued over time. So then the question became what was happening, as Eva talked about earlier today, right? And what they found is that the quality of the consultant-consultee relationship was what really impacted the reduction in implicit bias, right? So they found that the quality of the consultant-consultee alliance had significant impact on outcomes when the focus of consultation was a child of color. The strength of the consultant-consultee alliance more greatly impact the provider's attachment to the child and her confidence in her ability to support the child's needs, right? And we found that that this would happen when there was a strong relationship between the consultant and the consultee, and that they were either matched on race or ethnicity, or the consultant felt that they had an expertise in equity, diversity, and culture. So the consultant went in comfortable around these conversations, or they matched the consultee in their race. That's what really seems to be driving this difference that we're seeing in reducing that gap where boys of color were experiencing expulsion and disciplinary actions at a higher rate. So what we're going to do here now is we're going to turn to the consultants here, and I'm going to have them talk about what it's like to be in the field. How are they having these conversations with the consultees that they work with? And as Eva talked about, the first tenet, it's self-awareness. And so I'm going to ask them to share with you, how did they kind of get here? What drew them into early infant mental health consultation? How did they become involved in that? And they're going to introduce themselves to you and then share a little bit about how they ended up doing this work. So I'm gonna I see Deborah unmuted first. So Deborah, you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Deborah Chalmers. I am with Illinois Action for Children, hailing from Chicago. I'm also the director as well as an infant early childhood mental health specialist. And how I got into this work, well, I have one of those stories that's not one of those made for Netflix stories. I fell into it. I got here accidentally, seriously. When I applied for a job with an independent consultant who was also looking for a clinician. So I'm all ready to do my consultation, wear my clinician hat, because my specialty is children and families. And so he hired me on, and I was there for a few months. And so at the time, unbeknownst to me, I didn't know that he was providing what we now call infant mental health to Head Start. I mean, I didn't even know this was a thing back then, in all honesty. So he approached me and said, would you be interested in taking on this job? Because the woman who was coordinating it wasn't working out. So I said, okay, you know, I'm open for new experiences. I can apply what I know as a clinician. And so I took the job on. And so he came into my office one day and congratulated me for taking the job on, handed me a box of bills, told me God bless and good luck. And so from there, from there I had to coordinate at the time 135 classrooms. Wow. Because I found out at the time that he had about a third of the city's contracts for Head Start, as well as contracts in a suburban area called Joliet. And I had about a handful of consultants. And so I learned. And I tell folks all the time, my best teachers were teachers. They taught me how to do this work. And from that place, I have been in love with this work ever since. And that's been a minute. So that's how I got here.
So you started off in Head Start, and so you've been continuing in the childcare setting.
Yes, for a while. I was able to, from the whole experience, be able to move into private practice for a period of time, provide consultation to school districts, to educational coaches to CPS, to childcare, family childcare homes. And so I have been fortunate enough to have that range of experience. I have not had the experience of EI or home visiting, but I've had the rest of those experiences, which have really shaped my ability to do this work and to provide the level of support and guidance to the consultants that I manage.
Great, thank you, thank you. So who wants to jump in next, or should I pick one of you?
I can go because I.
All right, Hien, thank you.
Yeah, so as Sherry mentioned, I am Hien Sanchez. I am a licensed clinical social worker with Tulane University. So just to sort of, how did I get here? My background is that I was working in administration with a program. It was a community-based comprehensive program for maltreated children and families. Through that, being exposed to multiple disciplines, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, and being within that Tulane School of Medicine, that's when I found this fit of social work that really called me to, continue to support, a vulnerable population, but especially young children and their families. So while I was working full time, I got my master's through Tulane. It was a very, very rough time in my life, and not something I fondly want to talk about, but listen, it was really, a passion of mine. And so I was able to also do my field placement internship with this program. So working directly with children and families. So when the pandemic arose, there was also this sort of feeling of burnout on my end, that the sort of burden of dealing with the sort of systematic issues and barriers, like especially with child welfare, it just got to be very frustrating, and a lot of trauma with young children and their families. And so that was really a time where I had decided that I needed to shift my focus and really sort of kind of take into account of continuing my values and beliefs of working with children and families, and shift a little bit out of the sort of, treatment model, but now a little bit more into preventative work. I will say that through my work in this program, I often consulted, which it wasn't really called that, but I often consulted with daycare centers, with childcare centers, because they were having really, lots of struggles with managing, or even like sort of, limited knowledge of how to, support young children, maltreated children in childcare centers. And so that was an opportunity that I saw. Well, this, Tulane has a program that is Tykes program that is celebrating our 15th year. So there's statewide mental health consultants in Louisiana, which is amazing. And so that was already established. And so that was just really, for me, a great way to continue to pursue my commitment, but also in a way that is still in the field of infant and child mental health, and working with caregivers who are the teachers, the educators, the staff members, and families, and the development of young children in the New Orleans community. So that is how I got here.
There you go. So I'm just realizing that you really got a lot of this, like in the pandemic, you got a lot of your consultation experience, which has been a struggle for a lot of folks.
It's extra hard, because I don't sort of know sort of comparison of pre-pandemic of what consultation sort of looks like, but I do know what it looks like now, and it's just like, very stressful. So.
Excellent, thank you. And Claudia or Dawn, which of you wants to go next?
I can go ahead and go next. I actually identify a lot with what Hien would just mentioned. I think I also started looking into a different way of working with children and families when I started to feel a lot of burnout. So I right out of school, started working. I am a marriage and family therapist by trade. Started working with a lot of families and children here on the southern Arizona-Mexico border. And what I was noticing is I mean, the amount of referrals of the children that were being sent for our therapy services was it was a lot of children. And I was trying to understand, like, what exactly is going on with these children and these families, or why is it so challenging for them, especially, like I said, you know, a lot of the families that were immigrating from Mexico and trying to acculturate to a new country and a new school and everything. So I just kind of started questioning for myself, because like I said, it was a number of children that I couldn't possibly see. It was just too many of them. And I started thinking about what is out there that could maybe reach more families, reach more children, instead of me trying to put out the fires by myself. As at that time, I was the only mental health professional working in that small community of San Luis. And so I kind of started doing some research, started reading. Mental health consultation was, you know, getting off the ground at that time. I actually ran into some information about the SMART Support Program, which is the Arizona Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation System. And so I just started reading about it. I applied for a position, which was kind of crazy. I called it serendipity, you know, was opening up in the Yuma area. And I thought, this is a great opportunity for me to try to tackle what I was seeing as more systemic problems. Because again, I felt like a lot of the presenting problems or the challenges that these children were having were similar. And so I felt like it had to do with the school system, you know, possibly, or it had to do with the area that these children and families were living in. So I started with Smart Support in 2012 and have, you know, been with them since. My work did start in the school system or early childhood education settings, and also with home providers. So childcare centers that are actually home-based are very popular in Arizona, particularly in Southern Arizona, and with the Hispanic community, as they feel like it's more family-oriented. So there's smaller groups of children that are being taken care of within the home. And since then, like I said, I started work with Eva Shrivers at Indigo Cultural Center. A lot of, you know, what I've learned about including equity in the work has been through her and the work that she has done. And, you know, now I am doing consultation, but I'm doing it a little differently. I actually do consultation with home visitation teams here in my area. And that's how I got here. And I don't see myself doing anything other than what I do.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much. So you mixing it up a little bit. You've got some home visiting experience as well, which I don't think Hien and Deborah have. They're more in the education setting. So I'm glad to have that perspective. And last but not least, Dawn, how did you get here?
Okay, how much time do we have? No, I'm kidding. Yeah, it's kind of all mixed, but thinking about, you know, my education was in what do they call it? Clinical counseling. And, you know, when I was so lucky to be paired with, and I asked for someone who works with young children in my internship. And it was some infant mental health therapist, you know, way back in early 2000s. And, you know, it just spoke to me, you know, this field, and, you know, just the way that it's like there's I had a little epiphany about what attachment was, a little epiphany about how, you know, young children birth to 5 are so different, and how this type of clinical work had to do with the relationship with main caregiver. So when I, you know, graduated, I was excited, came back to Navajo Nation, and come to find out, no one knew about it. And to this day, I'm still working to educate, you know, folks about infant early childhood mental health, you know, the field, and now infant early childhood mental health consultation. So I was at the job I could find was at a local school that had Bureau of Indian Education funding, but it was run by the local community, and they still had residential, you know, residential living there. for 1st through 8th graders, and they went home on weekends. But, I saw, how a lot of the systems is still very the same, how families were affected. And, this Western way of thinking, it's just the here, it's all around. And I went to Navajo Head Start, and I thought I was going to be a consultant because it says mental health specialist, or, I thought I was going to be doing something more directly in the classroom. Come to find out, I was the administrator for the whole mental health program. And all of a sudden I had to check all these contracts of these mental health consultants, and had some things we had to straighten up to be in compliance. And I had a chance to rewrite the actual contract. And this was back in 2008, 2009. So right when, consultation was really kind of getting off the ground, and I used a lot of, what works, the document that Georgetown had, and, developing the contract. And so, and put in there, what we would like the consultants to do, visit regularly. And, so, and then found myself, kind of getting burnt out in the field of mental health, even though I was administrative, wasn't really doing direct work. And left the field for a little while and got experience in tribal politics, and was an appointee for a while for then President and Vice President of Navajo Nation, and then found my way back indirectly to this indirect work. On my own, I started to learn more about my culture and my spirituality, and realizing that mental health is tied into our traditional culture, Navajo culture. And then when I got this job and started to, really build a relationship, with my supervisor, this job as an early child mental health consultant, it just so happened that, it's serendipitous both times together, that, my growth spiritually and, my healing for myself and my family, it, came along at the same time when I had excellent reflective supervision, as a mental health consultant. And, it brought me along to realize that a lot of this work that I'm doing here on the ground in Navajo really, really has to go back to me, the consultant, that I need to know where I am in this space. I need to know, where I'm at in my process of healing. I need to know my historical context, my historical trauma, because I also need to heal spiritually the multi-generational wounds that are there spiritually, not just physically, not through unknowingly knowing, and through these different ways that attachment behaviors pass on. I had to know all of that. I'm still in the process of learning about all of that, but so that's how I'm here. Come July, it'll be 7 years. I can't believe already. But I really, really appreciate being able to come from the perspective of Indigenous Navajo thinking, and also from Western thinking, and have them combine to work together.
Great, thank you, Dawn. That's really powerful, all that connection, and it really kind of leads us into the next question. So I'm going to ask it of you and let you start off this time. But the next phase we wanted to talk about, the consultants to share, was a little bit about their equity journey. What supported them in getting to the space where they could infuse equity, inclusion, and anti-racism practices in your work, and maybe what challenges you've come across. You can answer one or both, but you kind of hinted at it, I think, a little bit with talking about reflective supervision. So I'll just let you expand from there.
Sure. Yeah, it's, my first experience with, doing this work was in classrooms, EC classrooms, and then moved to including home visiting, consultation with home visitors. And then more recently, within the past year, to family, friend, and neighbor care. And, thinking about the model that was there, that was, used in the Valley area where it's really populated, was once a week visits, 2 to 3 hours per visit. And, on a regular basis. And when I tried that here in Navajo Nation, it was so, expanse, not as much as Alaska, but it was, I had to drive 3 hours one way to get to one of my sites. And I was doing getting up at 5 a.m., coming back at 9 p.m. and ready to quit the job. But, to think about equity and how the work is different in rural communities and tribal communities, I always felt like I had to be a little more. I had to, provide more of a handoff, or be a little more of, I don't know, a listener, or whatever it is. I felt like I had to do a little more. And, I started to realize that a part of that doing and being a little more is a part of my own need to, I guess, center myself in my healing and how I show up. And then also, one example, one of my first sites, I had a teacher who, really, we all have biases, whether it's a simple bias, Pepsi versus Coke, or a bias of, male to female. I mean, whatever biases we grew up with, we know we have them. And a teacher who had a really strong bias, a strong feeling, that she did not like this particular little boy in her classroom, a 4-year-old. And he, when I was observing, he wouldn't do anything particularly really extremely different from other children, other boys. But he, she watched him more. She pointed out, called his name more frequently in the classroom. So then the other kids started calling his name out because teacher was watching him. We're all going to watch him. And come to find out, he became a child of, we call them focused children in our program. The parents signed a consent form. And we had a meeting, and come to find out, the teacher shared later after we had a meeting, she said, he just reminded me of my dad. This little boy said, "I'm sorry, Mom, I won't do it again." And she said, for this little boy to say that, and he reminded me of my dad, because my dad used to beat my mom when I was young. So she just, it brought up a lot of things for her, of hearing that kind of apology. And so to know that, in our work with consultees, that so much can come up for them. And then we have to know where we are in holding that space for them and relating it back to, how they are with children in the classroom. So I think as far as like equity, it's so much to go through and to think about, but even just the tangible pieces, things that are simple. So because of all that driving, putting 50,000 miles on my car that first year, I asked for a vehicle. They got me a vehicle, and they got me an internet hotspot. Yes, I got a phone and laptop, which is already, a given. And so different ways that they supported me. They scheduled their staff trainings in the Valley for when a day I might be there. So kind of, felt kind of special. They scheduled around me. So, different ways that they tangibly, really supported me, was very helpful.
So that there was that tangible support, and then also there was the reflective supervision you referred to, and then just your own real work on where you were, and holding all of that there so that you could be available to. And that's a great example of this teacher struggling with a relationship with one boy. Thank you, Dawn. I'm going to open it up to the other consultants, and if anybody wants to unmute. I see Deborah, are you unmuted? How did you start to become comfortable with this equity journey for yourself? And
I think for me was just experiencing how teachers would experience boys of color. And that was always my entree into the classroom. It was always a boy of color, and his ability to just not be able to connect with the other children, or not be able to sit still, or being a distraction, or just his presence for some teachers. And so as a result, it caused me to take a look and begin to question, why is that? And oftentimes I would be talking with teachers who looked just like that boy. They were of color as well. Wow. And so now, how do you reconcile your internalized racism as a result of having to experience that throughout your life because of the color of your skin? And, we don't escape it. And so it comes out in ways that oftentimes we're not often conscious around it. And pretty much as Dawn has shared, some of it had to do with their experiences with a father, a brother, a family member, and that child mirroring that within their interactions with that child. And so to that end is being able to help teachers to understand what really is it about that particular child that is really an annoyance, and they're really disrupting your classroom. Is it more about him and your expectations of him, or is it more about who he's representing, who he's being in that now moment?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that had caused me also to look at my own issues with my own childhood and my rearing and messages in relationship to African American men and boys.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is caused that introspection, as Don has alluded to, which has enabled me to have those kind of conversations with teachers.
Wow.
From that place. Because it's not easy when you're having that kind of conversation with another person of color. Because again, typically the conversation is around how we've experienced the racism, not that we've internalized it, and it gets represented in other kind of ways through our relationship.
Yeah, what a difficult conversation to raise that into a
Mm-hmm.
level of consciousness.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. What kind of supports have you found along the way in this work? What has been helpful to you? And
what's been helpful is just having the conversations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And having them openly and taking that risk of having them.
Yeah.
What's been helpful is being able to have conversations with other people of color around how has that impacted our lives. What is the intergenerational healing that has to happen?
Mm-hmm.
And be able to acknowledge that and call that out. So to your point, Sherry, it's just having the conversation and just having that courage to know you can have the conversation. That's another piece of it as well.
Yeah, yeah, great. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you. I'm gonna look at Claudia and Hien. Either one of you want to talk about kind of your equity journey and a raise in awareness and how you've brought that into the work?
Yeah, and I will echo what everybody has said so far, is that it was this individual journey that I sort of have been growing and sort of, reflecting on my own identity and how I've had to, assimilate. I was born in Louisiana. My parents were born in Vietnam. And so there was a lot of sort of reflection on like my own experiences growing up and trying to fit in and be accepted, and that as an adult we continue to do those things because of our environment that is supporting it and reinforcing it. And I will say that our department specifically has done, during this time of transformation, as you mentioned earlier, Sherry, is that it has given me so much more opportunities to find my voice, to find my authenticity, to find who I am, and to be able to advocate those things. And I think that has been helpful, having those conversations, because now, that has given sort of that confidence. So I go into spaces in childcare centers and have, teachers talk about their experience and sort of have those uncomfortable conversations, because we've all don't talk about it. And that's the problem. And that's sort of, that has been the disconnect, is that there has been so much, trauma and oppression and all of these things that everyone has experienced, and really shedding this new light of how do we come together and talk about our similarities, our differences, about who we are, and seeing each person individually, not for who they look like on the outside, or who sort of what our sort of initial judgments can be. And so, yeah, even in our TITES program, this has been something that's been central to our, group meetings and sort of our program, that we were able to do a book club with the Racial Healing Handbook. And that was so sort of instrumental in my growth, of where I sort of have been sort of going along on my journey. and this is the story of a story that I want to say, that we were doing a overcoming racism workshop with Mr. Kincaid, and it was amazing. And it was within our department. And I had this sort of moment that I was like, I had always introduced myself as Hien, so Hien, Hien, since I was a little child in education, for teachers, for people to say my name easily, right? For them, for everyone else. But that wasn't what my mom calls me. That's not what my dad calls me. In my language, in the Vietnamese language, it's Hien. And that was the moment that I'm like going to get a little bit emotional, but that was the moment that I took back my name and shared it with my colleagues and people that I have known for like 10, 12 years. And they did not know what my sort of real name was, or my pronunciation. And that for me was just like, these are ways that if you're not sort of aware or reflecting, they just continue to sort of kind of be what it is, and sort of unlearning those things that I can show up and be Hien, and that everybody can say my name in my language or in my culture. So sorry. But yeah.
No, that was a powerful moment. I remember when that happened, and I'm so glad that you shared that with us, because I know I've thought a lot about it since then, and what that message was, that you couldn't be yourself, any place else but home, and all the other connotations with that. And when you were brave enough to share that with us, and then feeling horrified that for 10 years I had been calling you the wrong name. Not that you were making us feel guilty, but that's
no, but like that's how it started. It was like, I'm making it easier for everyone else to say my name, which that just makes, that's that otherness, right? Like I'm still outside of, the accepted sort of thing.
Right. Oh, thank you for sharing that. Thank you. And you're getting lots of hearts, is what they're telling us in the chat. Lots of hearts. So Claudia, please share your equity journey with us.
Well, I think my journey in many ways does echo what everyone else has shared. I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that it does really begin with us. And I, like other panelists, feel like this also started when I was young. And growing up, I'm a first generation Mexican American, growing up in a country where my first language is Spanish. And so entering a school system where I had to be separated from other children, and in order to be in an ESL classroom and learn the language. And so I had a lot of those experiences growing up, and wanting to fit in, with the rest of the kids, and also feeling left out because I couldn't communicate in the way that they did. And so I think as I grew and, went through college, and then started in my professional life, I also felt that need to be, especially like I said, when I started working with a lot of the children that resembled my background, I really wanted to be that voice for them. But I also recognized that it was very difficult, and to have these conversations is very difficult. And so I will be very honest in saying, like I said, that I was a part of a program that tried to focus on, on how do we have these difficult conversations? And so one of the things that was very instrumental for me was becoming a part of a equity work group through the Smart Support program. So coming together as consultants on a monthly basis to have these difficult conversations was, not only healing for me, but it was, being able to have these conversations within a safe space, led, by someone who has this experience, like Eva Shrivers does, and being able to have these conversations with everyone else, consultants from different backgrounds, different part of the state, was very instrumental in me being able to then go out and have the courage to have those conversations with other people, because that had shown to me, that parallel process, that it's possible and it's okay to make the mistakes. It's okay, to say the wrong things or to admit that each one of us has our biases and that we make assumptions every day. And so that was very instrumental. And like I said, also building a support system, reaching out to those people that maybe already that have practice in having these conversations and that are those voices for those conversations happening, professionally. I felt like that was very important to me too. And so, keeping connected to those people that I knew that regardless of what happened in my workday, I could always call or I could email or I could just say, hey, I need to speak to someone. I just saw this happening in one of the education settings, or I just even saw this happening within my work, and being able to do that. And also, like some of the panelists also mentioned, the supervision, being able to have that safe space to be able to talk about these difficult things that are not only pertaining, in all honesty, they're not only pertaining to the children and families that we work with, but also within ourselves and everything that we face, and some of those biases that even we come across within the work, intentionally or unintentionally, done those microaggressions. And so being able to have those safe people or safe spaces to do so has been very important. And now me being able to go out there and have those conversations with others.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm hearing echoes. I'm hearing all of you doing your own work. I'm hearing all of you having practice, being able to practice these conversations someplace, be it with your own support system, be it with colleagues. Some of you, seems like your work, your agencies, supported that with some of the conversations. Really, great stuff here. So, yeah, go ahead, Dawn.
I'm sorry.
No, go.
Yeah. There's a whole part I didn't even mention, but very similar to my colleagues there. You guys are all reminding me what I forgot. Through this piece of supervision, also, when I started to learn about what infant early child mental consultation was, I saw the parallels. Like, okay, this is what an elder would do traditionally. This is what maybe a medicine man or medicine woman would do traditionally. So, I love to say that, Indigenous peoples are the true founders of infant mental health. We're the true founders of infant early child mental consultation. All of the 10 stances, just everything is, systemic and connected. Mental health is not separate from health. Spirituality is not separate from mental health, and, all of, with nature and connection. But, in this process of me, before I got to Smart Support, I started my own healing process spiritually. And, it's wonderful that both of them happened at the same time, when I got to Smart Support. But what I had realized was that I remembered a story my grandmother told me about her grandmother's grandmother was, it's her grandmother. So not many generations away. My grandmother's grandmother. She was on the long walk when Navajos were rounded up and taken to an internment camp in Fort Sumner, New Mexico. And she was a 4-year-old little girl, and she witnessed a really violent murder by a
Oh no, did Dawn go away?
Yeah.
She's going to leave us on the edge of our seats. Okay, when Dawn comes back,
what happened to attachment? What happened?
Dawn, you went off. So
no.
We just heard there was a murder. I think a murder, you were saying?
Yeah.
Okay, and then you went away. Yeah. So we didn't hear the
sorry,
rest of
can
it.
you hear me now though?
Yes. So yes. And then she went away again. She's gonna, okay. So one of the things that we wanted to ask about is, kind of even thinking more about consultees and, wondering for you if how has having this equity lens, has it impacted the way you approach consultation? And maybe if you have any stories that you would be willing to share about how you've brought kind of this knowledge, your own self-awareness, this equity, inclusion, diversity focus, anti-racism focus into your consultation that you would want to share with the folks out there. I'll open it up for that. Oh, I see Dawn's back.
So I heard your question. I'll just answer and finish what I was saying.
No, I think, yeah, Dawn, your bandwidth is too low. I'm
Oh,
sorry. So Deborah or Claudia or Hien, do you have any? Deborah, go ahead.
I'll answer.
Thank you.
What I've been able to do lately, working in concert with our early learning director, Carlos Patton. During my tenure here, she approached me and said, you know, I would love to have a place, she called it a safe place for teachers, just to really talk about how they really feel about the children in their care. And so it got me to thinking. And so from there, I developed a reflective practice group called Blue Skies. And what Blue Skies is, it is a brave space. A brave space is a space where we can hold whatever the issues are, and brave spaces are messy. They're intended to be messy, and brave spaces are intended to allow people just to have that introspection in a way that they're being held in their messiness. And so creating this kind of reflective space for teachers, it enabled teachers to have a parallel process. So Blue Skies is kind of intentionally led. Like for the first 20 minutes, we talk about some type of social emotional issue in relationship to children. And then it gets expanded out to what does that mean for that teacher? What does that mean for that teacher emotionally? How is that teacher being triggered? How does that teacher feel about particular children as they are responding behaviorally? And where do you think that's coming from? Working with parents that may trigger them, helping teachers to understand, you know, that your children and parents are our mirrors. And so oftentimes our mirrors will pop up and show reflections of situations, people that we may not have worked through our issues around. And so that child or that parent becomes that object of that teacher's issues,
Right.
and how they have issues with that parent or child. So Blue Skies has been something that teachers have been actively participating in. And since that time, I've been able to train teacher coaches to become facilitators, to provide this level of reflection to teachers. And they meet once a month for a couple of hours a month. And so as they are providing reflective space and being held, the mental health consultant that's assigned to our early learning program provides those consultants with a reflective space. And I, in turn, provide that consultant with a reflective space as well. So we more or less feel that ring of reflection, and we support and hold each other through that process. And as I said, oftentimes through that process, we're dealing with issues of bias. And how does that bias play out in the classroom? And teachers, as I said, through having that parallel process, are able to name and claim and become more conscious, because that truly is the goal.
Exactly. Wow, that's incredible. And I love the levels of supervision, recognizing that it needs to continue up for it to be able to work successfully, because that's hard work. Holding all that messiness.
You might think that we are all mental health consultants, because I want to echo exactly what Deborah is saying, is that this is really important in my work. And so when I go into centers and I hold that space for them to be seen, to be heard, so that they can hold space for those little people that are trigger them, that are reminding them of other people, that are just challenging, because it is stressful. Like, this time has just been extra. And so exactly the parallel process, that I hold space for you because I see you, I value you, you are hardworking, you are nurturing, so that you also can think about these children, also their families, their parents, their caregivers, right? Whoever is their village, so that you can see them as people as well, because we are all trying to do our best in this time and really figure it out. And so Deborah, exactly, like holding that space and giving that parallel process is what I, when I go in, I want to model that, but also, sort of go through those processes with them. So that's what I was gonna say.
No, and I was going to say, I echo the same thing. That parallel process, we always come back to it. And especially with holding space is very important. But also that parallel process when it comes to self-reflection. I think we've all shared here that, the journey has been a journey of self-reflection. And so I know that that's one of my main intentions when I, am building that relationship with, whether it be home visitors or educators or, policy writers, whatever it is, or whoever it is that I'm working on, whatever level I'm working on, I try to bring that to them and always remind them that there is no wrong or right answers. It's about asking ourselves those questions, and especially those very difficult questions, and not feeling like there's a pressure to do so. But I think when those opportunities do happen and they happen in front of you, being able to help them pose those questions, it has been very important in terms of, how do I work with a consultee? So being able to just not only ask the questions myself, but then have themselves think of certain questions that come up for them in terms of self-reflection. I think that has been one of the greatest goal, or the main goal for me when I come in, is if I could see that there's an increase in that self-reflection, then I feel like my work is done. Because I'll be very honest with the consultees and saying, this work is not easy. It's not, it can be very difficult. We are going to talk about difficult things. We're going to talk about difficult emotions. And so also normalizing that at the beginning and saying, we're going to take it a step by step. And, hopefully they have that relationship with you that you can say, and if we need to take a step back, we will. And if we need to talk about something else and then come back to it, we will. But, being very intentional about letting them know that this isn't hard, this is hard work. It's not easy, it's difficult. And then also getting them to that realization, which it even took me a very long time, even in my professional role, to recognize that change happens within relationships. We don't have magic answers. We don't come in to change children. We don't come in to change structures, but the change happens within the relationships. And so, trying to get them to understand that, I think, it is one of the ways, or one of the things that I come in with wanting to leave with the consultees, is that the change, we can't change anyone. The change happens within the relationship, whether it be, consultant, consultee, teacher, child, child, family, whatever it may be.
Thank you. Thank you. So I want to acknowledge that it's very windy in Arizona on both ends of the state. So we're having some bandwidth problems. I see Dawn turned off her camera, so maybe we will be able to hear from her, because I'm hearing that lots of folks want to hear her finish telling her story. Dawn, are you able to share now, or would you want to try to call in? Oh, Dawn went off. Okay, we're going to try to get her back on via phone. And she's trying to get back on, so we will give her the opportunity to go ahead and to speak. And I'm hearing, these themes going throughout what the three of you said about the importance of relationships, the importance of creating safe space, the importance of normalizing the messiness, and that it's hard work. And I want to give you the opportunity that if you have any other kind of stories or examples that would highlight some of this equity work, or the ways that you are helping to infuse equity into the work you do with consultees.
Yeah, I have an example that actually happened recently that I would think it just illustrates sort of how there are these opportunities and these moments that sort of come naturally or arise, and that for me, that I am very aware of, like, my interactions with everyone in my consultation work. And so this was sort of a newer teacher that I had met, and she was just discussing about the All About Me family tree, and that how she really, wants to build some more relationships with her families and her children, and sending home this project. And she did mention, so, see, like having them send pictures of mom, dad. And so through this conversation, I was able to sort of, kind of tell her about, how she is thinking about, redefining family. That family is also including her, right? She's part of this family tree that she wants to display, but that this activity, sort of thinking about maybe a very important person family tree, that it's not necessarily sort of this traditional nuclear family, and families that come in sort of different makeups, and same-sex families, or mom not present, whoever, and grandparents, extended relatives. And so she, through this conversation of this activity and sort of what she sort of wanted, she was like, really, really excited. She said, that makes so much sense, because I know families are different, and they're not sort of this sort of traditional way. And sort of, that's conversation that we had about, wanting to get to know her families, but also not unintentionally creating shame if their
Right.
family doesn't look like
Right.
what this activity that
Mhm.
she sends home.
Right.
And she said, and it was just a really nice, I mean, this was like a newer relationship, but it was one that it was like a drop, right? It was just sort of this little drop of information that this activity could be more inclusive to our families and children who might
Mhm.
already have those societal pressures of like, I don't have, a consistent, caregiver, or I have a village that is like putting, helping support them. And so that was an example of
That port of entry, right? You were just waiting, you were.
Mhm.
It just
once was
presented
there,
itself. And I
yes.
was just like, oh, well, that is a great activity, sort of thinking about family, and sort of family can mean so many different things. And that we want to like make children and families feel, welcomed and sort of
Yeah.
nurtured. So
So just keeping that awareness for when the opportunity rises
yeah.
to take
Mhm.
advantage of it. Yeah. Any other thoughts, Deborah or Claudia?
One of the things we do, we have what's called reflective group supervision, and consultants are encouraged to do case studies as a part of our reflective group. And we have a format by which we do the case studies by, and it's called the lenses by which we view the work. And so we are really intentional around viewing the work from that equity lens, from that lens of bias, from that lens of awareness, as that consultant shares their case study. They talk about that. They talk about the person's culture, the person's ethnicity, how they identify. They talk about how they were triggered by the conversation. I recall one consultant sharing a situation where it was really clear that the teacher had an issue with this African-American child, and they were not African-American. And so the group challenged the consultant in a way that said, can you have that conversation with that teacher? And so it caused the consultant, who also was not African-American, to have to take pause and begin to question, why do I get uncomfortable with having these kind of conversations? In the midst of all that, the team could support her around that and provide her encouragement and understand how that was difficult for her. So I think the process that we have created allows us to constantly have that conversation as a consultation team.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I love the names of your things. Blue sky, I mean, it's like, whoa. You're so creative, and this has given me like all kinds of ideas. I just got notification that Dawn is on via phone and is ready to finish her story. So I'm gonna pass the talking stick to Dawn and ask Dawn to if you want to come on and finish your story for us.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we
Yeah.
can.
Okay, alrighty. Sorry about that. It blew out the electricity. Of course, that's connected to the internet. I'm glad the cell towers are still working. Knock on wood, fingers crossed. So I hopefully I'll answer some of your question too. The last one that I heard, Sherry, just about, how I bring it to the work, but this trauma that this, little 4-year-old witness, which was my grandmother's grandmother, and that story that my grandmother told me, because it's a story her grandmother told her. And it made me think about, what did this little 4-year-old girl do when she became a woman? What did it do to her when she became a mother? And I thought, witnessing this kind of a violent murder, from a Calvary and a pregnant woman, I was thinking, well, she either fiercely, when she became a mother, protected her children, or she fiercely pushed them away. And what I think ended up happening in my family, mother-daughter relationships, is she pushed them away. I still see it, I inadvertently passed it on to me and my daughter, probably by the time she was 3. Every single mother-daughter relationship in my family is disjointed, is challenged. And, in me doing my repair, because of this history, it has helped me to center myself in thinking about, okay, there's this externalized oppression of genocide and forced assimilation. And then it has become internalized in the woman in my family, in my clan, and has transferred to me. And me only finding my voice, my, Indigenous woman voice, until my late 30s. And, finally really being able to speak up for myself and my children, and realizing and take lead and charge of the healing of my family spiritually, and through my behaviors, and through me showing kindness at different times of the day when maybe I'm super busy and stressed, but taking that intention and turning it positive, and with that, spiritual journey as well. So this piece of how do I bring it to consultation, I just want to share that sometimes, when we're in a process as a consultee in a consultant relationship, I do have the opportunity to train, through trauma-informed care trainings, and I will sometimes, tier it to Navajo communities, Navajo context, and share, about our history, our shared history together of many of our ancestors. When I ask questions and trainings, on the ground here, whether it was virtually or before, I ask them if they had an ancestor who went on the long walk to Fort Sumner, and almost every single one of them has an ancestor that went on the long walk. They have those stories still. And, we think together, in that training, and talk together about how that might affect us now. And, and I share with myself, professional use of self to benefit, the consultees, in that, I share that, okay, I acknowledge that I'm a product of this externalized oppression, and then I internalized it. And then I started, early in my career to, create conflict almost with my Indigenous peers. And I was really young in my career. And I thought, okay, what is this? What am I doing? At the time, I didn't know. But when I look back on it now, I call it out and I name it. I call myself in. So, okay, I'm going to work against this lateral oppression of my Indigenous sisters. So, since then, I've worked not to do that. I've worked to, bring others up in my own community, other Indigenous sisters. So I just wanted to share that part around, equity and how I bring my own healing and growth spiritually, and, in everyday things that I do as a consultant, as a mother, as a Navajo woman, and how it ties together, with what we do every day as a consultant as well.
Thank you, Dawn. That's powerful. Really acknowledging that intergenerational transmission of experiences, and being in a space where you could share that professional use of self. I know that you've done a lot of thinking and reflecting around it so that you could do it in a way that felt appropriate. And that's real. I think I can imagine how powerful that is for the folks that you consult with. And again, that, it goes back to Deborah talking about that, internalizing that, of the teachers when she was working with, who were, basically internalizing that racism themselves. You're talking about that lateral oppression in the same way. I wanna just let folks know that we acknowledge that some of this stuff may be triggering, and that we want to remind you of your mindfulness practices, that if you need to step away, if you need to take a breath, if you need to reach out, to please do so, because this, like we said, this is messy and this is hard. And we want you to make sure you're taking care of yourselves. Claudia has a story she's going to share with us, and then we're going to open it up to answer some questions. I know some questions have come through that we will respond to, but we will, open it up. We'll have about 15 minutes where we can allow our panelists to respond to some of your inquiries. So Claudia, please share your example.
Thank you, everyone. I just wanted to share this example of some of the, this happened to me as I was consulting in one of the preschools here in Arizona. And I think it just brought light again to things that I wasn't aware of, or biases that maybe I was not aware of. And it really had nothing to do with cultural, or cultural background or race or ethnicity. And I just felt like it was important to bring it up because, again, equity is not always about that. And so I was a teacher that I was working with in this preschool classroom who was very upset because she kept saying that there was the single father that would just not engage with her. And that he would come and drop off the child, be very short and sweet about the interactions that would happen. But they were really having problems with this father because he would never return any of the notes or documents that they would send home with the child. Some of them were like behavioral logs, or just things asking about participation, parent participation in the classroom. And one of them, and the reason I was reminded, one of the projects they were working on was like a all about me book, and they needed pictures and they needed all these things for this child. But this father would just never return anything. He wouldn't sign papers, he wouldn't return. And so, the teacher and I just kind of started reflecting on what could be the barrier. What do you think could be this barrier for this father? And so the first thing that came to mind was, the times maybe the father wasn't hurried all the time because he was an agricultural worker. And so he had to drop the child off, go to work. And then in the afternoons, another family member would pick up the child. And so we kind of, thought about that together and thought, could this be the reason why he's not engaging? The teacher also brought up, well, maybe it's a language thing. Maybe I should try also giving all the documents in Spanish and making sure that, the father is reminding me or responding to very simple, good morning, good afternoon, how are you? And he's able to reply in English, but I'm not sure that he has the fluency in Spanish. To make the long story short, it was neither of those things. It was through a lot of thinking together and just sitting with that discomfort of what this meant for this teacher, that this parent was not engaging and what it could be. It came to us. The father was illiterate. He didn't know how to read. And so even if he wanted to, he could not. He didn't know how to write. He didn't know how to read. And so even if he wanted to engage in any activity, that the preschool was putting on or respond to any of the things that were going on, he just was not able to. And so when we started thinking about this and putting things together, is that sometimes I was able to observe in the classroom when the father would drop off and, pick up when he was able to. We came to this conclusion until the teacher was able to have that interaction with him and say, if this is the case, I don't want you to be ashamed. It's very brave if you're willing to accept this. And the father was able to accept it. And that relationship changed dramatically. We saw not only a change in the way that teacher perceived the father, but also the participation of the father afterward, because all of the information then was passed on to him verbally. And he just became this, this great like ally for the teacher when it came to, you know, work at home with a child and family activities. But again, it's always about thinking beyond, because again, even when it came to us and we finally were like, this could possibly be what's happening, it was nothing that I had thought about in my professional role. And so just always being open to reflecting and observing and taking the time to really get to know those families. And so I just wanted to share that
Wow.
example, because again, it went beyond, you know, the language barrier, it went beyond the cultural background. It was, you know, about making everything accessible for everyone.
Again, the importance of relationships and the two of you being so persistent and determined to figure it out. Well, I have one question so far. I'm sure we'll be getting other questions, but I'll throw this out and whichever one of you wants to answer. This first one, the individual says, I'm a minority and work with a religious childcare center that has no minority teachers. They probably have 20% minority children. The staff and administrators have opened up to me. It has been hard. I would like to recommend they hire minorities. And so she wants to know what you all think. How would you go about doing it?
Yeah, recommending that to you know, the powers that be at her place of work, and speaking to the fact that representation is everything, and being able to have someone that looks like you, that can relate to you, and someone that can understand who you are as an individual culturally. And so to that end, that does play a role in how children even are able to see themselves and maintain their sense of self-worth and self-esteem.
I mean, I think that just the relationship already that has been built with being a minority and sort of like going into this environment and really like having them build their own capacity to like have diversity and be open to that. I think that is a place that you can definitely start and say, this is sort of, you know, what we want to think about in diversity and building relationships and building people and building community. And I think using your relationship would be a great place to kind of continue to encourage sort of thinking about representation, because it's so important.
Yeah, I agree with everyone. Oh, go ahead, Deborah. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, just quickly to build on what was just shared. They're open. It sounds like they're open, and so you have great leverage here, because you have folk who are conscious, and the new term we kind of joke about. We have folk who are becoming awake.
Becoming awake.
It does have some great like catchphrases.
Yes.
Love it.
And I would, you know, I would echo everything that has said. I think it's important not only to recommend that they hire minorities, and also the recommendation that, you know, the teachers look like the children, but really using the, you know, you as that instrument, just being able to have those conversations and, you know, maybe even sharing what it's like for you as a minority to be the only one in the center, to be able to, you know, that reflects the children that you work with. And then also just asking, like, is that even something that you guys even thought about before? Maybe it's something they never observed. And this is something that you as a minority are now observing within the structure and saying, I don't even know if you guys have noticed that. Can we have a talk about it? You know, let's just talk about it. And it, you know, if it comes from them and they decide that, yes, they do want to hire more people, then how do we go about that? Kind of, again, having those questions and then just having those conversations, but doing so from that relationship that you already have, you know, being and using that power that you have as being the only minority person within the center, I think is very important, because you're going to be an instrument, you know, for reflection and change.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. We have a couple more questions. The next one is, what recommendations, first steps, would you suggest that someone take around integrating equity and infant mental health consultation when they identify as white?
I would say start really being honest with yourself about the biases that you hold. In my opinion, it doesn't matter if you're white, if you're Hispanic, if you're African American, if you're Asian, it doesn't matter if you're Native American. We all carry these biases because of the environment that we were raised in, because, you know, experiences that we've had in life. So just really being honest with yourself. And like I said before, and I will re-say it over and over, it's hard work, and it's, you know, it's going to bring out things that you never thought would come out, but really being honest with yourself and start, you know, just that self-reflection, analyzing what are some of the biases that I hold that maybe I hadn't really thought about or wasn't aware that I had. But I think the work definitely starts there.
I agree, Claudia, that it is that self-reflection, that self-awareness of the implicit biases that we all hold and that we have learned and sort of, you know, have been supporting. Because once you sort of are more aware, then your sort of view, right, shifts of like, you look at things differently. You sort of are able to see things in a different way and really in a more like you'll sort of, that's the journey, that's the process of sort of peeling back the layers, so that you can sort of, you know, integrate it into your practice, your work, the folks that you're interacting with.
I would say just remember it is a journey, and that you're going to get it so wrong, and those are the times that you embrace yourself. Those are the times you're kinder to yourself. Those are the times that you will become wiser when you get it wrong, and you need to get it wrong, so as you can figure out what is right with you, and being able to ask those questions around your own biases and how you got them, and be able to also ask questions around society at large. Why do we have them? Because that's just as important.
So back to the really increasing your own self-awareness and really centering yourself, recognizing your own biases, be willing to stumble, know that it's going to be messy and hard, and be persistent. And maybe you know, look for a support system. I think that's what all of you had. People you can talk, people who will call you on it, right?
Oh yeah.
Great.
Can I jump in?
Thank you. Yes, Dawn.
Yeah, I'll just echo the same thing all my colleagues shared there. You know, it starts with the self, and also just what Deb mentioned about we have to unlearn and relearn history. I mean, if I asked everyone here, think of a country that begins with the letter D, we will probably all think of Denmark, right? Did I guess? Am I psychic? No, we're all trained in this same system. I was so upset with myself. I didn't think of the Netka, that's Navajo land. I thought of Denmark when I was asked that question. You know, it is so ingrained in us, you know, from very young age. So we have to unlearn and relearn, you know, because we're all trained in this system.
Great point.
I mean, I think this part about pronouns, it's, you know, I'm sort of hearing a lot more of like confusion, right? Sort of confusion and sort of about he, she, they. And so this is this unlearning part, right? Like this sort of binary, you know, system that was created. It's that it will be okay. We just have to work our brains a little bit more and you know, eat your Wheaties and sort of get some more brain power. I don't know, like your ginkgo biloba, I don't know, but like, right, like we are still human and on this growth and this journey of learning all the time. And if we think about our little kids who are just soaking all of this stuff in, they are actually much more adaptable and flexible. It's not them I'm worried about, it's the adults that are sort of still perpetuating all of these sort of notions and stereotypes.
Thank you. We have a third. Oh, go ahead, Deborah.
No, I was gonna say, just, you know, really quickly, as women, we have to adopt the mantra of I am enough. You are enough. You are born enough. And so that is the first journey into self, is recognizing that.
Thank you. So the next question we have is, what do you do with a teacher or administrator that has no self-awareness and doesn't care to self-reflect or be open to share during reflective practice? We've all had those.
Those are my favorite kind. So here's the thing. I believe you got to honor people's spaces.
That is where they
For
are.
whatever the reason. Yeah, there you go. And honoring that person's space doesn't mean that you stop. Certainly you understand why they can't. And always leaving room for that possibility. Because at some point in time, for whatever reason, and they feel comfortable, they may give you just a glimmer into who they are. Honor that.
Yeah, meeting them where they are. And it is that is all you can do, but also showing up as yourself and being not changing or shifting the way you are, but being your authentic self in order to build that relationship, because it is a journey. And so you have to take it slow, and they are further in the beginning than some other folks, and that's okay. But it's really showing up. I agree.
Yeah, I agree with everyone and what they've said. It's I don't believe that there is no self-awareness. I just think, whatever this person is experiencing in their life is maybe having them put up maybe they're just putting up something, a defense mechanism. Maybe it's just they're not comfortable enough in that relationship. So again, going back to, it's all about that relationship and what my colleagues have been saying, like showing up as your authentic self and not changing and not, not bringing up some of these observations or some of these topics because you're afraid that they might push back, being very careful and honoring who this person is and where they are. So I would definitely say not push it too hard, but not avoiding it, not feeding into it, not avoiding the conversations, not avoiding being yourself around them. And like Deborah said, take those little moments. You will be surprised. You have those ports of entry. We just have to be on the lookout for them. And when they're there, it's like these glimmering lights, you go for it and you take what comes. Maybe, something great will come from it. Maybe it will be a learning experience, but, we just take that risk of having those difficult conversations.
Also having part of, modeling, right, for the children or other staff members or administrators, but also self-humility, right? That also makes it feel less like you're judging me or you're sort of criticizing me or you're sort of taking me on this place that I'm not ready to go to, but also I'm knowing that I am not an expert. I am figuring this out and we are going to figure this out together. And just sort of giving yourself a little bit of a piece. We're all going to be messy together. And so it's okay. Yeah.
Dawn, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, just echoing what my colleague shared about, I think another piece too is that I just think about Edtronics videos about, when we're 30% of the time in good terms in a relationship, caregiver and child, I would say so too, the same for adult to adult, and that we have missteps, we have mishaps, and we can repair. And I think oftentimes, particularly in Indigenous communities, we weren't taught how to repair. We have these other ways that we've learned, unfortunately, and repair is okay, repair is good. In discomfort is when we grow.
There you go. There you go. Well, I'm watching the time and I want to thank the panelists here. You all shared some incredible stories. You were vulnerable and brave, and it is much appreciated. I know I learned more. I could sit here and listen to you guys for another hour chat, but thank you very, very much for being a part of our inaugural conference here and wrapping up the first day for us. And I'm going to go ahead and I think call it a wrap for our participants here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
Been
Thank
great.
you.
thanks, thanks. So I know we have one more minute on here. Anybody want to drop a word of wisdom before we shut it down? I
Just
don't know.
that, yeah.
I'm just so glad to
Good to
have
see
like
you.
had this share the space with you all, that you are doing this wonderful work across the nation, and that we're stronger in numbers, and I really am inspired and really so glad that we're all doing this together.
And that
Thank
reminder
you.
to
I
be
can, yeah.
And a
gentle
reminder,
with yourself,
yes,
to be gentle with yourself.
Yeah.
It's a journey and it doesn't happen
Mhm.
overnight. It takes time.
Yeah. And just be you, because everybody else is taken. So just be you.
Deborah, I love it. I knew you had one in you.
I just want to remind all the participants to do something kind for yourself today. We've had some really great presentations all throughout the day, and you've done a lot of listening and hard work, and this equity work can always be a little triggering. So do something kind for yourself, and
Mhm.
take a little moment to center yourself. And we look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow.
Yeah.